Okay, here we are with Joaquin. Chef Joaquin, what are you making right now?
Slime.
Wow.
The first slime
And
ever.
And can you tell us how you make it?
We need, what's that called? We need some glue.
And what else?
And then glue.
Glue and glue?
Uh-huh.
And what are the colors in there from?
Confetti.
Wow, very good.
Why don't you
So,
mix them up, Joaquin?
Any other tips for any students that might want to make it? How can they make it? If anyone wants to do this at home, what should they do?
They need a kit.
Okay, a slime kit. All right. We'll check in later with everyone. Okay,
Yeah,
bye.
we'll check in, and it might be slimy or it might not be slimy because we need it to rest.
Okay, very good.
I know because we made some at school. So.
Okay, welcome back. We haven't done a video in a while. We'll start a little bit the same as always. First, hope you're safe, hope you're healthy, hope your family is safe and healthy. Our World War II unit is complete. Just want to let you know, since it's complete now, at this point, you cannot go back and make up any missing assignments. The only thing you can go back and make up is the quiz if you still need to retake the World War II quiz. Why are we not letting you go back and make up other stuff? Right now, we want you to focus on our new unit. So if you want to improve your grade, the best thing to do is to keep up with all of your assignments for our new unit rather than trying to go back and make up everything for the last unit, okay? Speaking of new unit, our new unit is the Cold War. This was a very long war that did not involve any direct fighting but lasted for a very long time with lots of indirect fighting between the Soviet Union and the United States. So this is going to be a big unit. It's going to form most of what we cover for the remainder of the school year through remote learning. So although it's a war, we're going to start with some peace. Our first aim of this unit, how did the United Nations attempt to strengthen the weaknesses of the League of Nations in order to promote peace among countries? And there's the flag of the United Nations, which is an organization that still exists and is very important today. But we got to go back and do a little bit of review first. So the League of Nations was something we talked about during our World War I unit at the very end of that unit. It was similar to the United Nations, an international association formed after World War I with the goal of keeping peace among nations. The goal was no more war. World War I was the worst up to that point, and they did not want to see something like that happen ever again, so they made this League of Nations. So, was the League of Nations actually successful? Obviously, it was not, because we got World War II, which they were unable to prevent. One of the main reasons it was unsuccessful is they appeased Hitler. They gave him what he wanted. By giving him what he wanted, it led to World War II happening. So why? Obviously, one, they were appeasing Hitler, giving him what he wanted, and that led him to take more and more and more. There's another reason as well that they weren't able to do things to stop someone like Hitler. All of the decisions that were made by the League of Nations had to be unanimous, which means everyone had to agree. That's 42 different countries trying to agree on one thing. Imagine if we got an entire class together and we all had to agree unanimously on where to go on a field trip. We probably would not get everyone in the class to agree. So imagine trying to get 42 different countries to agree on how issues should be handled, like should we try to stop Hitler from taking this land, or should we try to stop Germany from building up more weapons, or should we try to stop Japan from taking more land, etc. Another reason that we talked about when we talked about the League of Nations is that the United States was not involved. Even though President Wilson from the United States had created this idea, the United States was not a member of the League of Nations. So in this political cartoon, which we did some work with last unit, you're probably a little bit better at looking at this cartoon now than you were before. In this cartoon, there's a bridge, and the bridge is called the League of Nations Bridge. It says this League of Nations Bridge was designed by the President of the USA. And even though it was designed by the President of the USA, you can see that one stone is missing from the bridge. It's what's called the keystone. It's going to make the bridge stronger. It's going to hold the bridge together. And without the keystone, the bridge is weaker. So the message of this cartoonist is that without the United States as part of the League of Nations, the League of Nations is weaker. So after World War II, they have to decide, what should we do? League of Nations 2.0. So 42 countries had joined the League of Nations initially, but the lack of U.S. involvement crippled it, which means weakened it. With members sharply disagreeing about its role, it was unable to deal with the crises of the next 2 decades, especially the rise of Nazi Germany. So in 1945, 46 nations met to discuss the creation of the United Nations, a new international organization intended to maintain peace between nations. So, similar goal, but can they prevent similar problems? So normally in class what we would discuss is we would come up with at least 3 policies that the United Nations should adopt in order to prevent future problems. They don't want World War III. They don't want another thing like the Holocaust, which happened during World War II. So we would typically discuss at least 3 policies, and these are a few that students usually come up with. First, a very popular one is that everyone should be involved rather than having some countries excluded. For example, Germany was not allowed to join the League of Nations initially. The United States chose not to join the League of Nations initially at all. So if everyone's involved, if all countries are members, maybe it'll be more effective. That's an idea students usually come up with. Decisions should be based on majority, not unanimous. Going back to that field trip example, if we all had to decide on where to go on a field trip as a class, we could probably get more than 50% of the students, the majority, to agree on one location or destination for that field trip. So it's similar to that. They're saying decisions should be based on majority, not on everyone 100% having to agree. Students often say the members should meet frequently to make sure that they're all talking about issues that come up, and that if there are issues that come up, the countries who are involved in any disagreement should meet with each other. They should have to talk about issues first. They should go through some sort of like mediation almost before they decide to go to war with each other. And then usually the class comes up with something like, oh, there should be some rules to prevent genocide, like everyone has rights to life, things like that, okay? So then we would typically do our vocabulary. The vocabulary is going to be United Nations, parentheses UN, that's often referred to as the UN. Same as League of Nations, International Peacekeeping Organization, but this one was created after World War II. It's still around. The goal is no World War III. The goal is no genocide. And there's some other goals you'll read about in the text today. It's things like ending world hunger, promoting health and safety around the world, ending disease, etc. One of the things that they did as part of this is they created this Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So the idea was to create a document that said everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security, no matter where they are in the world. It kind of connects to that idea we talked about of crimes against humanity. This is basically setting up that everyone has these rights, and from the perspective of the UN, to violate these rights, even though it might not be a violation of law in a specific country, it goes against the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and could then be considered a crime against humanity if you're taking these away from people within a country. The UN was initially one of the ideas of President FDR. He sketched out some ideas of how it could be better organized so that it would be more effective than the League of Nations. This is his wife, Eleanor Roosevelt. Unfortunately, FDR didn't live long enough to see the United Nations created, but his widow was very involved. So here she is holding up one of the Declarations of Human Rights. This particular one's written in Spanish. You've probably seen this building before. This is the United Nations headquarters. It's along the East River. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen, there's that building with like the white sides and the glass facing towards the river, and then the complex, all those other short white buildings along the river as well make up the UN complex. This is inside. This is this is the main hall inside the UN building, where many of the meetings are held with all of the member nations present, and important leaders give speeches there on an annual basis. And then there's other meeting rooms and other offices that are part of the facility. So this is a map showing all the countries that are involved. So you can see almost the entire world is involved in the United Nations, which theoretically is going to make it more effective because everyone theoretically has a voice, participates in what's going on. Now, how is it organized though? So it's not organized where everyone has an equal vote in every issue. So there's this General Assembly, which is 193 countries. They all work together to promote international cooperation, to create and maintain international order. That's all the countries that are in the United Nations. Then there's a smaller group within the United Nations, which is called the Security Council. The Security Council is 15 countries that are involved in the Security Council, and they're the ones that really make the big decisions about how to maintain peace and security throughout the world. So these 15 countries are the ones that are making most of the decisions. Now, 10 of the seats in the council are non-permanent. That means it rotates every 2 years. So most countries will have the opportunity at some point to be part of the Security Council. However, 5 of the countries inside the Security Council are permanent members. That includes the countries that were on the winning side of World War II. So the United States, Great Britain, France, Russia, in place of the Soviet Union, which no longer exists, and China. Those are the 5 countries that were on the winning side of World War II. So they became the 5 countries that were permanently on this Security Council. They are always involved in every decision that the UN makes. They have the power to veto, which means to block any decision that's made by the Security Council. So if the Security Council decides we are going to try to punish a country for not respecting people's rights in the Universal Declaration of Rights, any of these 5 countries could say, you know what, we are going to we're going to veto, block that decision to punish that country because, say, oh, they're a friend of ours, or we are doing business with them and it would hurt us economically. So these 5 countries have the most power, okay? So typically in class, we'd have a discussion about whether or not this arrangement of power is fair. On one hand, students have said, yeah, it's fair because the most powerful nations in the world should have the most say in UN decisions. They're the ones that won the war. They're the ones that are powerful. Of course, they should get the most say. On the other hand, people say, no, that's not fair. All members should have equal say. If we're trying to promote world peace, all countries should have the same voice. Additionally, some students have pointed out some countries were not powerful after World War II, such as Japan or Germany. Both were on the losing side of World War II, but they have become powerful once again. Japan has increased its economy such that at one point it was the 2nd largest economy in the world, second to the US. Germany is one of the largest economies in the world as well. But those 2 countries, and others as well, for example, India, have less say in UN decisions because they aren't permanent members in the Security Council. And some people have argued, well, what about France? Yes, they were on the winning side, but they're not as powerful or as important these days as a country like Japan or Germany, but France has a permanent seat on the council. The follow-up question would be, okay, well, maybe it's not fair, but is it effective to have the United Nations decision making arranged like this. So on one hand, students have said yes. Because it's no longer unanimous, making decisions by majority ensures at least that the UN will be able to take action on something, unlike what the League of Nations did. On the other hand, people might argue, no, the most powerful countries, the countries in the Security Council, the 5 permanent members, can block anything, even if it's supported by the majority. So that might be an example of something that's ineffective. Rebutting off of that, though, someone might say, well, yeah, but those are the countries that would have to enforce the decisions. The US, China, Russia, they're the ones that would have to enforce what the UN is doing because they're the ones with the most resources, so they should be allowed to veto or block something that they disagree with. And then lastly, adding on to that, someone might say, well, yeah, you know what, it's not perfect. Actually, it's not fair. Maybe it's not completely effective, but it's more effective than the League of Nations, right? And the fact that it continues to exist today probably attests to that. You're going to decide today how successful you think it has been. So you're going to read this article from Newsela. It's going to be attached to the assignment in Google Classroom. The United Nations formed for world peace. You'll read a little bit about the history of it, what's gone on during the time that the UN has existed, what's going on today with the United Nations, and then you're going to decide, has the United Nations been successful so far at accomplishing its most important goals? So first, you needed to define what is the United Nations, and then in your paragraph, identify a couple of the goals. You don't need to explain the whole thing, but just list 2 to 3 important goals of the United Nations among their many goals. Then take a stance. Should it be considered a success? Should it be considered a failure? Include some evidence in that statement to show that it is a success or failure. Include the counterclaim, and then, of course, prove that counterclaim wrong, okay? So, as we started at the beginning, don't forget, stay safe, stay healthy, stay inside, stay with your family, look out for each other. This unit is a new unit, so our World War II unit is complete. Don't go back and make up missing assignments unless it's the quiz. You can retake the World War II quiz if you want to improve your score, or if you didn't take it, you can make it up. And if you're concerned about your grade, instead of going back to the World War II unit and making up missing assignments, just be sure to keep up with all the assignments for our new unit. Thanks for joining us, and we'll get back to see what Joaquin has been up to. Thanks. Go.
We made the slime now. It's gooey and golly and Gucci.
And what can you do with it? Stretch it. And what can you make with it? You can rip it apart. What are you going to make with this slime?
I'm going to make a little baby with no head. A little baby robot.
Okay. Sounds fun. Maybe we'll show them the baby robot another day, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to let the baby robot get hard.
Okay.
So it can be a hard one. Like the balls that are made very old days.
All right, let's say bye to everyone.
Bye.